Good evening, good afternoon, and shalom to all of you. I apologize in advance, I have a bit of a cold. I'm not feeling well today, but I'll try my best. First of all, I'd like to welcome you to our very beautiful city. It's a city I've been living in for about 35 years now. I actually, although I'm a Muslim, I went to the Anglican Church School, the international school, which is not far from here. And although I'm a Muslim, I went to Hebrew University in Jerusalem. That's where I graduated with a degree in English literature and international relations. So, welcome. It's a beautiful city, and one can, I've been to many places in the world, and I always miss this city. I just think it's one of the most beautiful cities. So, after this intro, I want to tell you a bit more about myself, and then we'll talk about the situation, and afterwards, please feel free to ask any questions if you have about the situation and all that. So, as you heard, I'm an Arab Muslim living in Jerusalem. I was born to a mother from the West Bank, city of Tulkarem, and a father who's an Israeli Arab. He has Israeli citizenship. As such, I'm called an Israeli Arab because I have Israeli citizenship. We've been, as I said, living in Jerusalem for about 35 years. And I've been a journalist for about 22 years now. I started my career as a journalist by working for the PLO. I was never a member of the PLO. I was never affiliated with the PLO. But I always wanted to be a journalist. And I remember that back then when I finished high school, I walked into an office in East Jerusalem, not far from here, and I was searching for work. And that office turned out to be a newspaper belonging to the PLO, and they hired me as a translator because I happened to speak Hebrew and Arabic and English. So I worked there for about 6 years. I thought it was about journalism. I soon discovered it was not real journalism. It was like working in the information ministry of Saddam Hussein. But during that time, it was very useful and helpful for me because that's where I met many of today's PLO leaders. Although this was a newspaper, it was actually a place where many of the PLO guys used to hang out in East Jerusalem and in the West Bank. They all used to come there and meet. So during this time when I was working there, I decided to go to Hebrew University and study. So and when I graduated from university, and this was in the early 80s, I had to decide, do I go back to work in this PLO newspaper and do the same stuff that I was doing there, or do I go out to become what I call a real journalist? And I didn't hesitate much. I went out to work with the foreign media and later with the Israeli media. And this was against the advice of many of my Arab colleagues back then who said, you're making a big mistake, you should stay with us, soon we'll have a free media, soon things will change. I told them, look, for me, journalism is not about sitting in an office waiting to receive instructions from the PLO headquarters telling me how large Yasser Arafat's picture on the front page should be or what the headline should be. I don't want to do this type of journalism. I want to be a real journalist. So I went out to work with the foreign media, and back then, fortunately for people like me, the first intifada broke out, the first uprising, and there was a need for Palestinian or Arab fixers to take all these foreign journalists to the Palestinian areas. Foreign journalists who are based here and who cover the Palestinian issue do not travel to the Palestinian areas on their own for a variety of reasons. Some don't know their way around, others don't know the language, and most importantly, most of them are afraid to be there on their own. So they need people like me who are locals and who know our way around and who can handle difficult situations, and there have been many, especially with the foreign media. So I found myself babysitting the foreign media in Ramallah, in Gaza, and the refugee camps and all that. In the course of this work, I managed to get myself a few jobs with the foreign media, some of which I'm still doing until today. For example, since 1988, I'm the Palestinian Affairs producer for NBC News here. And since 1989, or I don't know, I forgot, I've been writing for U.S. News and World Report on Palestinian affairs. And I've also been producing documentaries for BBC, Channel 4, German TV, Australian TV. In the course of time, I became a film producer. And for for about 15 or 16 years, I was writing for a Hebrew paper on the Palestinian issue. I was actually the only Arab writing in Hebrew in a Hebrew newspaper. About 3 years ago, in addition to all the work that I'm still doing with the foreign media, and I forgot to mention that I'm also a producer for Danish TV and Swedish TV. I know that it's not popular today to say Denmark in the Palestinian areas, but these are the good times for me because the bureau chief is hiding in Jerusalem. He's afraid to go to Ramallah, so I do all the work and I get extra days. And when I go to Ramallah, I don't say Danish TV. I say, Danish TV? No, we're German TV. So, in addition to all this, I was about 3 years ago, the Jerusalem Post approached me. I'm sure all of you know the newspaper. And they said, we see that you are someone who's out there in the Palestinian areas all the time, and we also see that you speak a bit of English. Why don't you come and join us and start writing for us on the Palestinian issue? I didn't hesitate this time. I immediately agreed. And for the past 3 or 3.5 years, I've been writing almost on a daily basis for the Jerusalem Post from Ramallah, reporting from Ramallah, from Gaza, from all these problematic areas, I call them. And today, many people stop me and they say, what went wrong with you? Are you mad? You started off working for the PLO, and you ended up writing in this conservative, right-wing Jewish newspaper. Something must be wrong with you. And I say, no, absolutely not. There's nothing wrong. I, as a journalist, I have no problem working in any news organization that provides me with a free platform. I, as a journalist, I have no problem writing in any newspaper that does not interfere with my articles, that does not change a word. And many of my colleagues in Ramallah, they say, of course, they don't believe me. They're convinced that Mossad or Shin Bet or the Prime Minister's office issued an order to the Jerusalem Post to appoint me. They find it very difficult to believe. And they even find it difficult to believe that the Jerusalem Post does not change my stories. I always tell my friends in Ramallah, when they ask me about changing my stories, I say, you know what, you're right. I do wake up in the morning, and when I read the Jerusalem Post after it's delivered to my home at 5 a.m., when I read my articles, I do get angry with my editors. And I even phone them and I shout at them. They say, you see, we're right. I tell them, yeah, but you don't understand. I mean, it's for a different reason. They say, what do you mean? I say, I often call my editors and I tell them, didn't anyone go over my story? I see a spelling mistake and a grammatical mistake here and there. And the response of my editors is usually, and even until today, it's, don't worry, Khaled, you write even better than many Americans we have here. So I swear, that's the only reservations I have about the Jerusalem Post. I keep raising this issue with my boss, David Horowitz. He says they don't have a budget for proofreading and copy editing and all that. It's a bit embarrassing, but that's the situation. English is not my mother tongue. I'm trying. And still, he says, don't worry, you have good style. Well, we do change a word here and there in grammar. We try our best, but we can't prevent all these mistakes. That's the only problem we have. It's very ironic that I, as an Arab Muslim, the only place I feel free to write and express myself is in a Jewish paper. And I don't care whether it's conservative, right-wing, left-wing. There's not a calculation. Some of my Jewish friends tell me, how can you work in a right-wing Jewish paper? I say, what's so right-wing about it? I mean, I don't see anything right-wing. If this paper says that Yasser Arafat is corrupt, the majority of the Palestinians agree that Yasser Arafat is corrupt. So why do you judge us by right-wing and left-wing if we hate the PLO or like the PLO? This should not be the way to judge things. Here in this, over the past decade or two, it's become in Israel that if you say anything against the PLO or the Palestinian Authority, then you're against peace, or you're right-wing. What do you mean? I don't accept this. I have been criticizing the Palestinian Authority from day one in all my writings. And when I say from day one, I'm talking about from the day they arrived here, from the day the PLO came here. I've been writing about corruption, I've been writing about mismanagement, I've been writing about abuse of human rights under Arafat. And many people used to tell me, you shouldn't be reporting these things, and I say, why? They say, because this type of reporting plays into the hands of the Israeli right-wing, or into the hands of Bush and Sharon and the enemies of Islam and the Palestinians. And I say, what's the relevance? I'm a journalist. I have to write the truth. I have to report the truth. And if this is the truth, then that's it. Why do you target the messenger? If you want to change the situation, go to the Palestinian Authority, go to the PLO. Unfortunately, many of the people I work with in the foreign media ignored this story, the story about what was happening under the PLO after the signing of the Oslo Accords. So Arafat got away with a lot of corruption. He actually stole the money of the Palestinian people. $6.5 billion went down the drain, or to certain secret bank accounts, or to support the shopping sprees of a certain lady sitting in Paris, or. And when we used to talk about it back in those days, people said, "This is Jewish propaganda." Excuse me, the Jewish lobby did not pay me money to say this. What do you mean Jewish propaganda? I was in the United States several times before Arafat left the scene, let's say, and some U.S. officials there asked me, what's happening in the Palestinian Authority? Yeah? I talked for about an hour, and I described, all the frustration on the Palestinian streets, all the anger. I told them it's very serious that the money that you are giving to Arafat and company is going down the drain. It's not really going to the people who need it. And I said, have you been influenced by the Jewish lobby? I said, no, I've been influenced by the Palestinians in Ramallah, in Gaza, and all the villages and refugee camps. These are the people I talk to, not the Jewish lobby. What does the Jewish lobby have to do with this? So, we've been talking and talking. No one wanted to listen. Even the foreign media I was working with did not want to report the story. I think it's because there was no anti-Jewish angle to the story. So what if Arafat steals the money? We want to write about the occupation. Our editors back home are not interested, and. So they got away with it. Until the first intifada erupted, the second intifada erupted in September 2000. And I was one of those who were not surprised when it erupted, and I was actually writing about it. I forgot to mention, but I was also writing for the Jerusalem Report. It's a bi-weekly magazine. And I wrote there that we are heading towards an intifada. The Palestinians are very angry, not because they're angry with Israel and the Jews, but because they don't see the fruits of peace, of the so-called peace, because they've been deprived of all the international aid, because they don't see any improvement in their living conditions, and. I'm one of those who are strongly convinced, based on my personal experience, and again, not because the Jews paid me money to say this, that had Yasser Arafat and company invested maybe 20 or 30% of the money that they stole for the welfare of the Palestinians, we would not have had an intifada in September 2000. When the Palestinians erupted in September 2000, it was because they had nothing to lose. There were no factories, no hospitals, no schools, nothing. They did not do anything. I said where the money went. The intifada did not erupt because Sharon destroyed the mosques, as Arafat told the people. He lied to the people. He told them Arafat is destroying the mosques, to go out to the streets. And why did he do this? Why did Arafat say all these things? Because Arab dictators survive by constantly inciting their people against Jews and the West. You always blame the miseries of your people on the Jews and the West. That's how dictator Mubarak survives in Egypt, by unleashing this unprecedented wave of hatred and violence against Westerners in his mosques and in the media. When I read the Egyptian media and I hear a debate on Egyptian TV, and then I take the Palestinian newspapers, believe me, the Palestinian newspapers look as if they have been published by the Jewish Agency Information Department. When you compare them with the Egyptian media and what's said in the Egyptian media, it's awful. So people then wonder, how come all these terrorists who carried out 9/11 came from Saudi Arabia and Egypt, the two supposedly pro-Western countries. As I said before, this is how these dictators survive. And this is exactly what Arafat did here. From the day he arrived, it's not only him. I'm not talking about the man as much as I'm talking about Arafatism, what I call Arafatism. It's the PLO and the PLO that I used to work for. I'm not saying these things because they didn't pay me my salary. I did get my salary. I mean, I have to admit, but I'm just I'm presenting the truth. So Arafat survived by unleashing this wave of incitement against the Jews from day one, after the signing of the Oslo Accords. And this is also one of the biggest ironies of the situation, that the Oslo Accords and the U.S. taxpayers' money and the European taxpayers' money were used by Yasser Arafat to incite against Jews and against Christians and against basically everyone except for the Palestinian regime. You were supposed to hate everyone, but please don't hate me, the Arab leader, the Arab government. This way, when you incite against the West and the Jews, you keep the people busy hating someone else. And they will never come to you and say, excuse me, why are you stealing our money? So, as I said before, one thing led to another. 4,000 or over 4,000 Palestinians were killed, more than 1,000 Jews killed in the past 4.5 or 5 years of this intifada. And, I still drive through East Jerusalem and I still see the mosques over there. And I always ask myself, why did all these people die? If this intifada was called the Al-Aqsa intifada and it was supposed to prevent Sharon from destroying the mosques, as Arafat claimed, so why, what went wrong? It's very sad, it's very tragic. I always say that the Palestinians are actually the victims of their own leadership, such as, like most of the Arab people and the Muslim people, we always allow ourselves to be intimidated by thugs, by corrupt regimes, by dictators. That's very sad. I'm not saying this because I want to defame the entire Arab people and the entire Muslim people. I think the people on the personal level, on the street level, people are very nice, and they're much more moderate than their governments. I think the people, as I said, have been victimized and misled by these corrupt regimes. I, as a Muslim, I was in Toronto recently, and I was invited to Radical Islam Week, and people asked me, aren't you afraid to go there because it's organized by right-wing Jews? I said, no, I'm not afraid to go there because for me, I'm going to tell the truth. And they said, what is the truth? I said, I'm going to stand in front of all these people who come there, and I'm going to tell them that, excuse me, this is not Islam that you're talking about. These are just a group of terrorists and thugs who have hijacked Islam. I'm a Muslim, there are 1 billion Muslims, and we're not all terrorists, and we're not all murderers, and we're not all bloodthirsty, and we're not all Osama bin Laden, and we're not all Zarqawi. And ironically, although I'm not religious, I found myself standing there defending Islam. If you told my friends in East Jerusalem that I was defending Islam, they would laugh, because they say this is the last guy who's a religious figure, or a believer, let's say. But that's the truth, and as I said before, I think Islam has been hijacked. I think the Arab people have been hijacked by their leaderships. So here we are today in a situation where Hamas has won the election in the Palestinian Authority. Hamas won the election. Again, I was in the United States about a month ago. I was interviewed on many TV, including CNN and Fox News, many TV and radio stations. And the first question was always, how do you explain the surprise victory of Hamas? And I told them, excuse me, sir, for you it's a surprise, but for us back over there it was not a surprise. For us the writing was on the wall. You guys in the United States refused to read the writing on the wall. You even refused to see the wall itself, although it was very big. You wanted, you didn't really care. One day before the election here in the Palestinian Authority, I was asked by the Wall Street Journal to write an op-ed about the elections, and my headline was, Palestinians are headed toward regime change. And the entire editorial board of the Wall Street Journal phoned me expressing concern that, they said, we don't want to look like fools if we publish this. What are you talking about? Are you sure the Palestinians are headed towards regime change? And I told them, yeah, this is not a scoop. I'm out there, and this is what the Palestinians are saying, that they're fed up with corruption, they want change. Hamas is a terrorist organization, yes, but Hamas has been very clever to run in these elections under the banner of reform and change. So I believe that the Palestinians are really headed towards regime change. So they reluctantly published it, and within hours I was proven to be right. Not because I'm a genius, and not because I'm a prophet, and not because I'm an expert, because I'm just someone who's out there. I don't consider myself to be an academic or a Middle East expert or anything like that. I'm just a reporter, someone who's out there reporting the facts. Unlike many of my foreign colleagues, when I go out there, I don't need a translator and a fixer with me. I just hear things in Arabic, and if something is written on the wall, I read it in Arabic also. I don't need someone to translate or to mistranslate it for me. So that's what happens. So we are in a very difficult situation now because Hamas won the election, and where we headed to, I don't know. It doesn't look good. I'm not optimistic. I wasn't optimistic in the first place anyway. I'm actually very worried. I'm very worried for a variety of reasons. Because one, I see attempts by some parties in the international community to whitewash Hamas, which is something very dangerous and something very serious, because that could actually be the first step towards trying to find a so-called reasonable explanation to why Hamas killed all these Jews. And that's very dangerous because that sets a precedent. And that could pave the way for justifying other crimes or mass crimes that happened. So that really worries me. When I read AP and Reuters, or when I watch CNN and I hear all these descriptions that they give to some Hamas leaders saying, this guy in Hamas is pragmatic, Hamas is beginning to show signs of moderation, and I don't know what, all these phrases they use, it really worries me because, I mean, what's moderate in Hamas? Because he has only killed 10 Jews, he's moderate and pragmatic and realistic, as opposed to the guy who killed 200 Jews who's an extremist. I mean, if we start making these distinctions, I don't know where it's going to stop. So that's one. Number two, I'm very worried because I think the Palestinians have actually shot themselves in the foot by voting for Hamas, because I don't see any future under Hamas, not because it's I'm afraid of, or the Palestinians are afraid of strict Islamic teachings and all that, but because Hamas has nothing to offer, not with regards to the peace process, not with regards to a better future, and they're not going to bring about the Palestinian state or anything like that. So that's also very worrying. And number three, I'm very worried because I see the United States and the international and some parties in the international community trying to conspire with the former Fatah leaders to undermine Hamas, which is also absurd because you asked for democracy in the Palestinian areas. This is what the Palestinians chose. So now by conspiring against the Palestinians' will, you're actually boosting Hamas. You're further strengthening Hamas, and you're sending out a message to the Palestinians that, okay, folks, now I'm going to punish you because you didn't vote for the same thieves who stole your money all these years. This is exactly the message that the Palestinians are receiving, and it's absurd, it's ironic. So it's a messy situation. I don't know where we're headed to. People keep asking me these days to write analysis. I say, I don't know what to write. You can write one thing in the evening, and in 3 hours it could be irrelevant already because of the pace of development. So that's how I see things. And sorry for this bleak picture, but I think it's realistic. That's how I see it. And believe me, I don't have an agenda. I'm not pro-Israel or pro-PLO or anti, I'm just a journalist, as I said, a reporter. With no ambitions, by the way. I don't even want to be the deputy editor of my paper. I'm happy to be a reporter out there in the field. I'm happy that many people in the foreign media rely on me and work with me. And, my reputation and my credibility is much more important than any agenda. So I'm a journalist, as I said, and that's very important for me. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy. Well, unfortunately, this is one of the consequences of the unilateral withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, or as they call it, disengagement. This is what happens when you wake up in the morning and you run away in the face of terrorism and violence and bloodshed. You send the wrong message. We live in a neighborhood where people watch your moves very carefully. And if after 4.5 years, and if after 1,000 Jews are killed, you simply wake up in the morning and you evacuate 8,000 people and you run away, what's the message you're sending? The way the majority of the Palestinians saw this disengagement was, this is great. We murdered 1,000 Jews in 4.5 years. These guys run away. So let's continue. So if they get a Katusha, they'll fire it. And if they get a tank, they'll shoot. And if they get an airplane, whatever they get their hands on, they'll use. Because they see a pattern. This intifada erupted 4.5 months after Israel ran away from South Lebanon in a very humiliating manner. And I remember back then all these calls among the Palestinians saying, and don't forget, we're talking 4.5 months before the Intifada erupted in September 2000, many Palestinians were saying, Hezbollah is right. This is the only language Jews understand. We should copy the tactics of Hezbollah we should resort to suicide bombings, roadside bombings, we should fire rockets, and they will run away. And it took them only 4.5 months to do it. So I said before, if these are the messages you're going to send out to your neighbors, then you should not be surprised if a Katusha... I was even surprised that it took them so long to fire the Katusha. You've abandoned the borders with Egypt. You've handed the Gaza Strip over to gangs. Not that it was not ruled by gangs, but now it's a heaven for gangsters from all over the world. I wouldn't be surprised if Osama bin Laden has moved already to Jabalia refugee camp. So you've created an international center for terrorism. And I know I sound now like a right-wing Jew, but I'm being realistic. I'm not opposed to separation, and I'm not opposed to withdrawal. And I'm just saying, you want to do these things, do them in an honorable way. If I was Sharon and I wanted to leave these areas, or I wanted to take any similar message, I would have done it in a different way. I would have, first of all, decided that I'm leaving the Gaza Strip. Between me and myself, I would have said, okay, now I've made a decision. So how do I implement it? That's very important. I would have called, let's say, a peace conference in Paris, in London, in Copenhagen, maybe not Copenhagen again, but in one of these capitals. And I would have brought some of these Abus sitting in Ramallah, Abu Mazen, Abu Allah, Abu I don't know what. Although I don't believe in them, but I would have invited them, they would have come, I would have had an international umbrella, and after 3 or 4 days of deliberations, let's say, it's not going to be serious deliberations because you've already made a decision, I would have emerged from that room and said, now as a result of the peace process and I don't know what, Israel has decided to leave the Gaza Strip. That would have sent the message that if you come to the negotiating table, you get what you want. If you murder us, you don't get what you want. Unfortunately, Sharon did not want to do it that way. He wanted to send them the wrong message. Maybe he had good intentions, but I'm just saying, you should not have done it this way. You should have done it in another way. It would have spared the lives of many people. I see Olmert now about to make some mistake. I don't understand. I mean, I just don't understand. I tell my Jewish friends, is something wrong with you guys? Don't you guys learn, it doesn't make sense. There's logic in this world. You make one mistake, or you go into a room and you're burned by fire. You don't walk back in. You learn the lessons. Well, I don't know. I mean, I've stopped understanding Israeli society or Jewish mentality. I thought I was an expert on Jewish mentality. I don't know what's happening in Israel. I'm very worried. I'm very worried by the fact, that many Israeli Jews simply don't care. Many Israeli Jews tell me, you know what, Khaled, why don't you Arabs take everything, just leave us northern Tel Aviv and the beach, and let us travel twice abroad a year. And I tell them, what about Jerusalem? They say, well, Jerusalem is for the Haredim and for the Arabs. We don't want it anymore. And, this is really what I hear. There's a new generation of Israeli Jews who don't care. For them, Jerusalem does not mean anything. The walls of the old city are just stones. And there's no emotional attachment or anything. That's very sad. It's very ironic. And when I compare it with the nostalgia and the longing on the Arab side, it's very strong. The attachment to the land is very strong. It's in the books, in the poetry, in the speeches, in the rhetoric. But here in Israel, it's just real estate and property, and it doesn't mean anything. There's no emotional attachment. I go to the Arab villages, and I see people talking about the olive tree, and the land, and the soil, and how precious it is. And in Israel, people talk about it. Take it, we don't want it, take this, take that. What is this? Are we in an open market, wholesale, an auction? Look, I would understand if you were giving land in return for, peace and I don't know what. But if you're just giving up land for nothing, why give it up? I wouldn't give it up. And who? To who? To who? To a group of gangsters? Liars? Thieves? And I'm not, the results of these, I'm actually happy that Hamas won the election. Not because I support Hamas, but it only proved what I was saying. I was on 15 campuses after Hamas won the election in the United States, including some of the most hostile anti-Israel campuses. And the first people to walk up to me and to express support for me were the Palestinians and the Muslim students, because they said, you know what, you proved to be right. All these years we thought that to talk about corruption in the Palestinian Authority was Jewish propaganda and it was all exaggerated. And now we see that Because Hamas won, it was a vote of protest, and you were right. So people have to keep their eyes very wide open. Yes, sir. Look, if you give in once, and you do what the United States, what Uncle Sam wants, then you have to just continue with it. I don't know. I mean, that's something I also don't understand. I think one of the reasons why many Israelis did not go to vote yesterday, and I heard this from many Israelis, is they said it doesn't really matter which government is in power because the U.S. will eventually decide for us. I don't know. Yeah, there's this thing in Israel that, Washington anyway makes decisions for us, and we do what Washington wants. And we signed the Oslo because Bill Clinton wants, and we run away from the Gaza Strip because Bush wants, and we do that. We open the Karni border crossing because Condoleezza, what's her name? Condoleezza. What is this? What is this? You know what? You should not. The problem is not Israel; it's the U.S. You should come to the U.S. and tell them. I think that the more pressure you put on any of the parties, it backfires, and it only creates tensions. What has U.S. policy done in this region? It's led us from one disaster to another. They brought on us these gangs from Tunis. They gathered thousands of PLO fighters from around the world. They gave them uniforms and Kalashnikovs and called them policemen. Yeah. So the result was that car thieves and rapists became policemen overnight. And the result, I'm not saying these things without any facts. I know what I'm talking about because I'm out there. The result was that people who murdered Jews, if you murdered, how are generals and colonels, how do they receive their ranks in the Palestinian Authority? Until today. You don't need to go to a military college or a police academy. They bring you, okay, Muhammad, come here, you come. How many years did you spend in Israeli prison, Muhammad? He would say, 5 years. 5 years? Okay, you're a sergeant. Yeah, then they bring, Ali. Ali, what did you do? I was in Israeli prison because I threw 2 Molotov cocktails at an Israeli car. Did you kill any Jews? No. Okay, you're first sergeant only. And then you've murdered a Jew, you're a colonel. And if you've murdered more than one Jew, you're a general in the Palestinian Authority. Look, is this a peace? I mean, how can you build peace like this? The U.S. and the EU were lying to themselves. They brought these gangsters here. They dumped them in the Palestinian areas and the West Bank and Gaza, and they called them policemen. They called them police security forces. These guys are actually Fatah militias, and they continue to operate as Fatah militias. And if anyone is responsible for anarchy and lawlessness in the Palestinian areas, it's these Fatah militias. It's not Hamas and Islamic Jihad, by the way, who are running wild in the Palestinian areas. Hamas and Islamic Jihad are much more disciplined. They don't rape women. They don't steal. They don't carry out armed robberies. They don't go on rampages, shooting and killing. I'm not here to defend Hamas and Islamic Jihad, but when you compare them with these gangsters, they look much better. And that's one of the reasons why Palestinians voted out those gangsters. They told them, enough is enough of you. We've had enough of you. No, I've been reporting ever since Hamas won the election. They say, yes, but we are in power. What do you mean we are in power? Hamas won. There's a clear majority. And it was a free and democratic election, by the way. It was. And then the United States is saying, well, now we're going to deal only with Abu Mazen. Again, so what are you saying? You're going to deal with the opposition now? You're going, what kind of, it doesn't, I don't know, things don't make sense. I stopped understanding what was going on. And you know what? The majority of the Palestinians also don't understand what's going on. Hamas, which won the election, needs the approval of the PLO, which lost the election, to rule. They have power, but now the PLO is telling them, with the help of the US and Israel and the Europeans, well, you need our approval to, what do you mean? Then why do we have elections? And not only that, but what's funny is that they're telling them, you must change your policies. What do you mean? I went to the election, and I told the people, I don't recognize Israel. There's no such thing as Israel. We want all of Palestine. We're going to fight corruption. That's why they won the election. That's why the Palestinians gave them a mandate. Now, the U.S. and everyone's telling them, well, in order to rule, you must change. So if they change, how will they become different from Fatah? So what are they supposed to pretend? So this is very serious, because this is what happens when you try to pretend and make things look as if they're good. This is Hamas. This is the true face of Hamas. Hamas does not lie. Hamas is telling you openly. So you want people to lie, like the Fatah guys. The Fatah guys did lie. They signed the Oslo Accords, saying we recognize Israel. They were liars. So for 10 years we had this thing called the peace process, which was one big lie. And now they're saying, okay, Hamas, now you must lie also in order to rule. I don't write these things, by the way, not like this. This is just an open... Well, you see, if I was lying, I would be more afraid. But I'm not lying. What I'm telling you is what, I invite you with me to Ramallah, and you will hear exactly the same things that I'm telling you from the average man on the street. Okay, you're not going to hear it from Hanan Ashrawi and Saib Arikat, certainly not in English. But I feel confident because this is what I hear. This is absolutely, and I go to Tulkarem, where my mother lives, and I go to refugee camps. I work in these areas every day. This is what I hear. Exactly. So what, it's not that it's not dangerous. It is dangerous out there. And there are people who don't like these things said. And there are people who would say, why do you bring the dirty laundry out? And there are many of my colleagues have been beaten, shot, assassinated, tortured, all these things. But I chose to be a journalist, a reporter. And for me, a journalist's job is to tell the truth. And these are the risks involved. If I'm going to allow myself to be intimidated and afraid, then I should stop writing and go and work as a taxi driver or open a grocery or something else. But this is a risk, it's a calculated risk, and I have to live with it. The alternative is to lie. And I don't want to lie, because if I wanted to lie, I would have remained in the PLO newspaper 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, 26 years ago. Time. I mean, I've been criticized. People, why did you publish this story? Why did you publish that story? You shouldn't have published it. It's veiled threats, I call them. It's like you should understand the message. Don't do this, don't do that. But as I said, I'm not afraid. Because I haven't lied. I would be more worried if someone phoned me and said, you got the facts wrong, you misreported, you misquoted. That never happened. People say, okay, what you wrote is true and 100%, but you shouldn't be writing it. Certainly not in a Jewish paper. Or don't tell these foreigners everything. If, for example, I'm walking in downtown Ramallah and I see statues of Osama bin Laden being sold in the open market, and I go and report it in the Jerusalem Post, and I'm criticized. People say, you shouldn't have published it because it defames the Palestinians, and it shows that we're all terrorists, and it plays into the hands of Sharon and Bush. And so it's like, why don't you just become a liar like the rest of us, and you'll be okay. No. Look, I know what you mean. I'm a member of the 1.2 million Arabs who have Israeli citizenship and are Israeli citizens. Now, I'm not the one who's saying there is discrimination. The Israeli governments are saying it. President Katsav said it 2 weeks ago. He said there is discrimination against our Arab citizens, and we need to correct it. It's very sad that although the overwhelming majority of Israeli Arabs have been extremely loyal to the state of Israel since its establishment, the Israeli establishment has made many mistakes in dealing with the Arab population. Now, I don't know if it's the result of systematic discrimination or just a lack of will on the part of many Israeli governments, successive Israeli governments, to deal with the Israeli Arab issue. We're talking here about rights, equal rights, education, infrastructure, and funds. Israeli Arabs are fighting for integration, and that's what their battle is about. It's not for separation as the Palestinians are. Unfortunately, in the last 6 or 7 years, many Israeli Jews no longer see any difference between Arabs with Israeli citizenship or Arabs living in Gaza. We are all terrorists, we are all enemies. And you know what? I blame the PLO for this. They actually widened the gap between Jews and Arabs ever since they arrived here. They are responsible for the fact that many of my Jewish colleagues today look at me as a fifth column, or as a demographic threat, and these are all new phrases that we never heard before. Now, we hear today that the Israeli government is trying to change the situation, to correct it. They're talking about, I think they call it affirmative discrimination. Okay, that's good. They're trying to change the situation. I would like to see more Arabs serving in the public sector, as ambassadors. There's no reason why Israeli Arabs should not be incorporated. And you know what? If someone is not loyal to the state of Israel and does not want to live in the state of Israel, he can go. Just tell him, give me back the Israeli citizenship and go. Let's hold a referendum. You know what? I can tell you as a journalist, I might even ask for your help. If you find one Arab inside Israel who is willing to move and live in an Arab government, under an Arab government, please send him to me, because that will be the headline of tomorrow's Jerusalem Post, an interview with this guy. So Israel should understand the message. We're not a threat to Israel. We're not trying to replace mosques with synagogues with mosques. We're not trying to change the Jewish character of the state of Israel. We're just fighting for equality. We want to be incorporated into this state. I always say that Israel can be a Jewish state for all its citizens. There's no contradiction between being a Jewish state and giving minorities equal rights. As simple as that. And so people say, well, okay, are you prepared to serve in the Israeli army? Yes, I am prepared to serve in the Israeli army, and I'm prepared to send my son to serve in the Israeli army. However, what guarantees do I have that you will still give me full rights, especially when I see non-Jews, such as the Druze and the Bedouin, who serve in the Israeli army and are still complaining of discrimination. So we need to put a lot of pressure on the Israeli government to change. I know Olmert on a personal basis, and I believe he will try to change something. He was once the Minister of Arab Minorities, and when he was mayor, I used to meet with him a lot. And I believe he will try to change the situation. All you need to do today is just implement the Orr report, the commission of Judge Orr. It's a commission of inquiry report that was issued after the 2000 riots inside Israel, in which 13 Israeli Arabs were killed. And in that report, Judge Orr writes that the problem is not the specific incident as much as it's the disenchantment of the entire Arab population in Israel, and they're being subjected to discrimination for many years. And he says we have to change that. So it's a judge saying it. I told you 2 weeks ago, President Katsav announced it. He made some very strong statements in this regard, and I welcome it. I do see, positive signs. I do see more and more Israelis prepared to tackle this problem, but I'm saying it's not enough. More has to be done. Which Arab community? There are many Arab communities around. Well, I wrote about it today. Apparently you don't read the Jerusalem Post. Well, again, you should draw a distinction between the response of the leadership and the response of the people, the man on the street. The leadership is saying, they're expressing, first of all, again, we should also draw a distinction between which leadership we're talking about. Is it the Abu Mazen's or the Hamas leadership? Today when we talk about the Palestinian Authority, I'm confused, because I don't know which authority to write about. We have two authorities now. I said, one won the election, the other is saying, fine, you won the election, but I'm continuing to rule. So, what we're hearing from Abu Mazen and Haniyeh, the Hamas leader, and all these other guys is that Israel's plan for unilateral withdrawals from the West Bank is very dangerous. It's not going to bring peace. It will only increase tensions. It's very bad. Unilateralism is bad, and. So, that's what you hear from the Palestinian leaders. And they're saying, we hope the new Israeli government will opt for peace and try to change the situation, and we hope it will revive the peace process, as if there has been a peace process. For the man on the street, people say, I don't care. It doesn't make much of a difference who's in power in Israel. I want to live. I want to move around. I want to work. I want to earn money. I don't care about politics. It doesn't make it doesn't change anything for me. I anyway don't see a difference between Olmert or Netanyahu or Peretz, and so it doesn't really make much of a difference. The man on the street is more concerned with urgent day-to-day matters. For the past 10 years, since the signing of the Oslo Accords, the Palestinian community has lived with 10 heads, if not more. We've had, don't forget, Fatah and Hamas are not the only parties. They're not the only players out there. You have Islamic Jihad, and PFLP, and DFLP, and Badil, and the People's Party, and the Independent Palestine, and I don't know what. And then you have 17 different security forces that are called security forces. They're actually militias. And then you have the Hamas armed wing, and then the Islamic Jihad armed wing. So it's a total mess out there. And anyone who holds a gun and has 10 followers establishes his own regime. So it's very sad. It's very sad. And it's very sad that this has been done with the help of the United States and the Europeans. It's U.S. taxpayers' money that is paying these guys' salaries. And it's very sad. Some things don't make sense. It's as easy as that. How come things that are so clear and obvious to us, the man on the street, cannot be seen by Condoleezza Rice, for example? When I go to Ramallah to a press conference between Condoleezza Rice and Abu Mazen, and Condoleezza Rice in a room like this, and I'm sitting there, she stands like this, and she says, "I want to praise Abu Mazen for ending incitement in the Palestinian media." And I'm like sitting there, carrying in my hand 3 Palestinian newspapers, and the major story in these Palestinian newspapers is how the Jews have begun using wild pigs in their campaign against Palestinian farmers. Jews are actually releasing wild pigs in the West Bank to drive the poor farmers out of their lands, and it's part of a transfer policy, and then all the association between Jews and pigs, and I'm like sitting there, what's she talking about? But I can't stand in the middle of Ramallah and challenge her when all these thugs and murderers are surrounding me. I'm sorry, I can't. I have 3 children to look after. What's also funny is that at another occasion, maybe 2 months afterwards, again, the same situation, we arrived there, and it's not only me who's laughing, it's the rest of the journalists, but we can't say, especially the Arab journalists who know the reality. We can't say anything. So he stands there and says, Abu Mazen is a great man because he has reduced the number of the Palestinian security forces from 12 to 3. He has consolidated the Palestinian security forces and reformed them. So again, I'm like sitting there. Okay, so I took a bunch of foreign journalists with me afterwards. We went to eat hummus in downtown Ramallah after the press conference. And on the way from the president's office, they call it president, Abu Mazen's office, to the restaurant, we counted on the way 7 to 8 different members of the Palestinian security forces. Because even the Secret Service there, they go with badges saying we are the Secret Service. Because everyone wants to show off. I told you, it's amateurs and gangsters. And then the foreign journalist asked me, who are these guys? I said, these are the guys that Condi just said, that they've been reduced from 12 to 3. They said, but we've counted already 7 on the way. I said, so ask her. Why are you asking me? She said, does it make sense? I said, yeah, many things don't make sense here. But then, what's very sad also, is where is the foreign media? Why isn't the foreign media carrying out its job? Where's CNN? Why doesn't anyone question what these guys say? Why doesn't anyone challenge them? Why do they always challenge an Israeli Jew if he says something and try to prove that he's a liar? But anything that one of these Abus says, or that Condoleezza Rice says, is like the Bible in the States, or I don't know. Maybe. I think the real problem is that these news organizations hire journalists or fixers or consultants who are not journalists. I happen to be an independent, let's say, I try to be professional, fixer or consultant, but many of my local colleagues, they see themselves as foot soldiers serving the revolution. They believe that their job is to prevent the dirty laundry from being brought out. So they don't tell the foreign journalists everything, And I can give you hundreds of anecdotes like this. So that's one. Number 2 is that many foreign journalists are simply biased, if that's the right word to use. Yes, against Israel and against the Jews. they look at this conflict and they say, in this conflict there are the good guys and the bad guys. The good guys are the Arabs and the bad guys are the Jews. I always tell them, look, in this conflict there are many good guys, and that's how you should look at it. The people, the Arab people and the Jewish people are really good guys, and they can get along together, and they have been living together for many years. Ironically, things went wrong after the Oslo process started. After the peace process started, everything was destroyed, after Israel brought the PLO here. But before that, I miss the good old days when I used to wake up in the morning and go to Ramallah with my Jewish friends and do our shopping and then eat in the restaurants, and people would receive us very nice. And so I do believe that the people can get along well. But, Israel made many mistakes. They brought these gangsters here, and now we are all Jews and Arabs paying the price for this so-called peace process. And now, what's worrying is that instead of learning from the mistakes of the past, now they're saying, let's repeat the same mistakes. One more peace process like this and we're all finished. That's too much for me. I'm not really an expert on these issues, but, I don't know how important the oil is and all that, but I can tell you that relations between Israel and the Arab countries will change if education changes in the Arab world. That's where we should start. For these dictators that have been ruling there for many years, some of them supposedly pro-Western dictators, they filled the Arab people with so much hatred towards Jews in the West. And that needs to end. And how do you end that? By stopping to support. You must stop supporting dictatorships around the world. These dictators lie to you by saying, if you get rid of us, you will get the Muslim fundamentalists. And I say, it's their presence in power that brings the fundamentalists and makes them much stronger. Under Arab dictatorships, there is no third way. There are no good people in the middle. There are no liberals and intellectuals and moderates and Democrats. Why? Because they suppress them. They're in prison. They don't allow them to function. They don't allow them to hold political rallies and. So where do people go? They go to the mosque. That's one of the few places in the Muslim and Arab world where you can practice some kind of political freedom activity. And in the mosque, who's waiting for them? It's Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Because people are so angry with their dictators that they go to the mosque, as I said. So the presence of these dictators in power brings you Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Al-Qaeda, and all these others. And that's very sad. If we hold free and democratic elections in the entire Arab world today, Al-Qaeda and Zarqawi will win. It will be a vote of protest against the dictators. Not necessarily because people support what these guys do, but people would want to punish the dictators, as we had here in Ramallah, and they would go to the extreme. Now, I'm not saying, on the other hand, that all those who voted for Hamas did so simply because they wanted to punish the Palestinian Authority. I think maybe 30% of them did, or 25%. And I saw Christians and secular people who voted for Hamas. And it was a vote of protest, and they said, we want to punish the thieves. But we must not forget that Hamas has a strong following. Hamas is a very popular group. Many people do identify with Hamas's charter. It's a very dangerous one. Many people do identify with Hamas's ideology of destroying Israel. So we must not allow ourselves to be misled by that conception that it was only a vote of protest. It's very worrying. I've been following what's happening in these countries for many years, and I can tell you that it's escalating. The anti-Israel and anti-Jewish sentiments are really on the rise. So I don't know how we can stop it unless we get rid of these regimes and force them to change their message. For many years, Westerners and the United States refused to hear what Yasser Arafat was telling his people in Arabic. And I remember 1997, I think, one of my colleagues, and I was there at a press conference, asked Shimon Peres, excuse me, Mr. Peres, what about the incitement in the Palestinian media against Jews and Americans? And Peres' response was, I don't care what these dictators tell their people in Arabic. I care what they tell me in English. And I was like sitting there, telling myself, doesn't this man realize that what Arafat is telling his people is kill Shimon and Chaim and all these other Jews Doesn't he get that message? I mean, how blind can you be? How stupid can you be? So they didn't want to read these messages. Only after the first Intifada erupted did people start asking real questions. Wow, where did all this anger come from on the Palestinian side? And I told them, this is the result of 10 years of peace. This is your peace process. The Palestinians did not become anti-Israel and anti-Jewish overnight and explode in this way, in a way as to lynch two innocent reservists who took a wrong turn into Ramallah. That hatred, I was there. So this hatred was the result of 7 or 8 years back then of the peace process, of what Arafat was telling the people. And because the United States and the Europeans did not want to hear him in Arabic, they were surprised when the Intifada broke, when all this anger erupted in September 2000. They said, where did it all come from? I told them, it's like, in Hebrew, we say, Boker Tov Eliyahu. If you had been reading the Palestinian newspapers all these years, you would have seen it. If you had gone to one of these mosques and heard what Arafat's preachers were saying, you would have realized. And today, I'm telling you, if you go to any mosque in Cairo and you hear what they're saying today, you will know that it's only a matter of time before more Egyptians come to the United States and carry out a big attack. Because it's continuing. In order for a third Intifada to erupt, we have to end the second Intifada. And as you heard from this one, I mean, a Katusha is not an Intifada. Yesterday only we had a Katusha. Today we had 5 rockets. So I don't understand. I mean, is this peace? This is Intifada. It's continuing. If you can't carry out a suicide attack because of the wall, then you send a rocket. Or you throw a stone, or a Molotov. But unfortunately, we've reached a situation where people say, wow, the situation is great. Today we had only 6 Qassam rockets, 2 Katushas, and 3 stabbing attempts, and 5 Molotovs. It's great. There's peace. What is this? I was there. Again, 87, the first Intifada. It was the first Intifada erupted. Look, I think, first of all, you should look at the trigger for that Intifada. It was a car accident. And because the Palestinians, what happened was like this. Let's take the sequence of events. A Palestinian on a glider, you call it? He came from Lebanon. A few months before the Intifada, or a few weeks before that Intifada, he came from Lebanon, landed in Israel, walked up to an army base in northern Israel, and killed maybe 5 or 6 soldiers. Some of them were sleeping, and he was killed, and that was the end. It was a big attack, and the Palestinians were proud of it, and it caused an uproar because it was the first time that a Palestinian group had used a glider. And a few weeks later, 6 Palestinian workers returning to the Gaza Strip from a hard day's work in Israel were killed in a car accident with a truck, with an Israeli truck outside Gaza. It was a normal car accident. So the rumor on the Palestinian street was that these 6 Palestinians were killed deliberately and in response for the 6 soldiers who were killed, and the driver of the truck is actually the brother of one of the soldiers who were killed. And Israel tried to deny it, and everyone tried to deny it. But we live in a place where rumors are sometimes stronger than facts. And rumors can kill also. So people, after the funeral of these 6 workers who were from Jabalia refugee camp, the largest refugee camp in Gaza, after that funeral, the families started throwing stones at the Israeli soldiers. Israeli soldiers were not prepared because they did not expect this to happen. It was a very small Israeli force near the area. And the soldiers were afraid for their lives, and they opened fire. And one thing led to another, and the more people were killed, the riots spread. Now, you have to notice, where did these clashes start? They started in the refugee camps, and they continued in the refugee camps for most of the Intifada. Because I think the real problem of the real Palestinian issue, the core of the Palestinian problem is actually the refugees. I think if you have solved the issue of the refugees, you have solved over 95% of the problem. That is the main issue. The violence always comes from the refugee camps. The first and second Intifada, when you hear about riots in Ramallah, it's not that the Christian families or these middle class or upper class families in Ramallah are rioting. It's people who come from nearby refugee camps surrounding the city, into the city, and they do what they do and they just go home at the end of the day. So that needs to be resolved. The PLO and all the Arab leaders lied to them. They've been lying to them for many years. Look, I think it's a tragic issue. I feel sorry for these people. And I think we should look at it as a humanitarian issue. I visit many of these people, and they're victims. These are people who are very angry, very bitter. They've lost everything. They need to be compensated. Someone has to have the guts to stand up to them and tell them, folks, let's stop dreaming. You're not going to go home to Haifa. Let's start searching for other solutions. You do have a problem. We know about it. We know that your Arab brothers are refusing to help you in the Arab countries. We know that your Arab brothers are keeping you in very difficult conditions. We know that in Lebanon there's a law, a written law that bans you from working in 72 professions. Can you imagine if Israel had passed a law here saying Arabs are not allowed to work in 72 professions and to specify these professions? I visited the refugee camps in Jordan and in Lebanon, and I've seen what it is. Believe me, a refugee camp in the Palestinian areas is a modern city next to there. And if you see many, a couple of years ago, a Danish editor came here to Jerusalem, and he phoned me and he said, Khaled, I would love, it's my first visit to this area, and I want to see a refugee camp. So I drove north of Jerusalem for about 12 minutes, and then I stopped. And he said, Khaled, I told you, don't take me to the city, please take me to a refugee camp. And I said, I'm sorry, but we are in the middle of Kalandia refugee camp. And he looked to his left and to his right, and he saw 4- and 5-story buildings. And he said, but where are the tents and the mud houses? I said, that's in the albums and the archives of the TV stations from 48. So people there are many misconceptions about, people are simply ignorant, or that Israel has failed to explain the issue. But I think, it has to be resolved. We have to look at it as a humanitarian case. Unfortunately, no Arab leader is capable of standing up today and telling the truth to these refugees. Sari Nusayba, he's a professor from Jerusalem. He's a decent man. He's an academic, educated in England, and he's a prominent leader from Jerusalem. He stood up 3 years ago and he said, folks, enough is enough. We have to stop lying to these refugees. There will be no right of return. And where is he now? He's hiding in the States. Sari Nusayba. He's a university. He's actually a president of a university. He belongs to a very aristocratic family from Jerusalem, a family with a history of 800 years in Jerusalem. I mean, I don't know about moderate, but I respect this man because he had the courage to stand up and tell these guys, maybe he's radical on other views, but I respect him for one thing. People condemned him as a traitor, and who are you to tell us to give up the right of return? And no, and look, you have to understand, before the Oslo process started, I hardly ran into a Palestinian refugee who had very high hopes of returning to Haifa and Jaffa. Ironically, the Oslo process came and put the issue of the refugees on the table. It said the issue of the refugees will be discussed in final status talks. So what is that supposed to mean? What is the message? You're sending to the refugees that your problem is about to be resolved. So people in the refugee camps in Lebanon and Syria, they said to themselves, well, if these Jews have given us Gaza, and they have brought the PLO there, and they have even armed the PLO, and they are prepared to give us this and that and that and that, then one day they will certainly allow us to return. People developed very, very high hopes. It increased the hopes of people to the extent where people started looking for their old documents, preparing to return home, and. And in addition to all this, what added the fuel to the fire was the fact that the Palestinian authorities started establishing all these right of return centers in the refugee camps to educate the new generations about their former villages. So the result is that in most of these refugee camps today, you have all these centers where younger people are taught about this is where your grandfather used to live, and it's a village, and one day you will return home. And the Palestinian Authority used to, during the Oslo process, they used to organize tours when there were no checkpoints. They used to organize tours of these refugees to their former villages inside Israel. So you can only blame the Oslo process. Those who, again, what the architects of the Oslo process did was to lie to these people again by giving them high hopes. It's the same what the Arab leaders have been doing. So they lied to them. They should have, when you signed the Oslo process, you should have made it very clear, folks, no one is going to return to their original homes. Start searching for other ideas. For this, I blame Israel. They made a big mistake. They said, okay, we'll discuss the issue of the refugees. And by the way, Barak repeated the same mistake in Camp David, where he let it be known, or let it be understood, that Israel will allow up to 100,000 of these people to return. So people said, if he's talking about 100,000, then he will certainly allow 1 million to return. You see, the way people see it here, as I said, they see a pattern in Israel's behavior. People say to themselves something like this: if you had told us 15 years ago that Israel would ever bring the PLO to Ramallah in Gaza, we would have asked you, what kind of medication are you on? If you had told us 12 years ago that Israel would arm the PLO, we would have told you you're nuts. Go see a psychiatrist. If you had told us 4 years ago that Israel would unilaterally withdraw from the Gaza Strip, it wouldn't have. If you had told us, look, so they see a constant. For them these are miracles. Look, I admit, if you had asked me a couple of years ago, do you think Israel would ever agree to make any concessions in Jerusalem, I would have told you it's a taboo.